Mind of Christ. Part 1. From the 262 readings. As the consciousness of the Master is raised in their individual activities, so is the cooperation in a body as was from the beginning, when the cooperation brought into being those forces as manifest themselves in this material world. How may we have the mind of Christ? As we open our hearts, our minds, our souls, that we may be a channel of blessings to others, so we have the mind of the Christ, who took upon himself the burden of the world. The joy, the peace, the happiness, that may be ours is in doing for the other fellow. For, gaining an understanding of the laws as pertain to right living in all its phases, makes the mind in attune with creative forces, which are of his consciousness. So we may have that consciousness, by putting into action that we know. Seek to know his way, and as I am lifted up in thine consciousness, so will I be lifted in the consciousness of others. As the light comes in thine own life as respecting the various duties in a secular and spiritual life, so will the body consciousness be able to be the balance as would keep a union of purpose, keeping all in order. Please interpret as the activities of self in the relations to others is made active, so will the water of life be made more plain, more active in the experience of self, as was the depth and the activities of that mother of life seen. Again an emblematical opening of the entity's consciousness, as to that practical applicability of things unseen upon the relative forces, of force within individuals, being raised in their consciousness to the awakening of the universality of the continuity of life, God, in human experience, and as the lesson, as is and will be awakened in the consciousness of each entity, is aroused in the study of self, these awarenesses of the activities become more and more real. Unseen forces are the more powerful than those seen, or realities. The dreamer, the visionary, those who attune themselves to the infinite, the more often they receive the more infinite power, for those attunements that will bring into being those as of the realities of the unseen forces, being as coordinate in their activity, as the night follows the day, the moon sheds its light from the activity of the giver of light, the sun. Are my dreams ever significant of spiritual awakening? As is experienced by the entity, there are dreams and visions and experiences. When only dreams. That of the physical health or physical conditions. In visions there is oft the inter-between giving expressions that make for an awakening between the mental consciousness, or that has been turned over and over in the physical consciousness and mind being weighed with it the self holds as its ideal. In visions where spiritual awakenings, these most often are seen in symbols or signs, to the entity. For, as the training of self's consciousness in a manner of interpreting the visions would be in expressions of eye, hand, mouth, posture or the like, these are interpreted in thine own language. When these are, then, in symbols of such, know the awakening is at hand. In what way can I best serve? Not gifts, but self is that necessary to be used in aid to others. Not my will but thine be done in me. Use me. As thou seest fit. Not as I would be used, but as thou seest fit. As the body consciousness and mind lends a stability to others, then doubt not self, for to doubt self is to create that of a negative force that brings upon its return to self discontent. See. For, as ye seek, ye shall find. Faint not at the long tarrying, nor be not unmindful that he that is faithful unto the end shall wear the crown of life. Well that the ideal and the suggestions as given be that rather of the personal nature, as individual, than personality presented in same. As given there would come the sign for each as they applied themselves in knowing their own ideal, and how same is applicable in their own experience. To some has come in the form of tests, that is proclaimed or claimed by them, must be acted in their own experience, as to relationships to others. In some in the form of greater opportunities, in the manner in which there may be given more and more of that which will arouse in the inner beings of others a closer concept of an ideal. In others a vision of those forces as may manifest in the activities of their own selves towards others, as well as to those who have experienced the presence of that consciousness that is abiding promise is true in this period of their experience. Faith. As each have their own concept of faith, as to whether this is grounded in experience in relationship to life's activities in the material, or to the activities in the mental, depends much upon what has been held as the ideal of that individual. The analysis of self as to whether this that is held is confidence or faith is the first question, as would naturally arise in the minds of each individual. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. Faith is a spiritual and mental process. Then there is illustrated the activities of individuals as to how, through the exercising of that prerogative, that through which is brought into beings the worlds as is manifest before each individual that looks about them with a view to ascertaining that they are a portion of the whole, yet with the abilities to discern all, and able to use that will bring the same exercising of that prerogative as the Spirit of the Father brings through faith into that being where this may be of this or that sphere of man's own perception. Brought into material aspects, we find the greater portion as partakes of that as has been termed the sensing, or that of the whole of the nervous system and a physical, living organism, that make such an individual aware of that concept. This is confidence. That has been brought into the consciousness through the activity of the spiritual forces manifesting in and through that of the spiritual force of the individual. Then becomes the essence of faith itself. Faith. Pure faith. Is the accepting or rejecting without basis of reason or beyond that as is perceived through his five senses. Little becomes in the scope of acceptance, except they live by faith that they become aware of. Faith not of the senses, else it becomes confidence and personalities of the experiences of the senses within themselves or others. Let each so examine themselves in the light of that they have attained with the concept of their individual ideal, and we will find upon what faith is founded in their experience. As each teacher, minister or seer or prophet receives that obeisance, respect, as is giving the life from that faith and hope as held by that as an individual in the Christ is found, that is the advocate with the Father and the Spirit of the Father glorified in him, that approaches through that manner, without that as is approached in the spiritual activity of any individual. Her individuality is last lost, even as man in spirit overcomes death in the material, even as he overcame death in the material, and able to put on immortality in a material world, bringing to man not only a flesh that endowed with the ability to be one with the Father, but magnifying the Father in the individual yet in the material plane. Each in their respective spheres are stepping stones to that may awaken in the individual the knowledge of the Son in their lives. How can I so strengthen my faith so as to become a fitting channel of help in God's healing of my daughter? 275. Magnify in the words of mouth, the acts of the body and hand, that is given day by day. As the ideal is a growth, as the activities of the physical and mental consciousness through confidence brings that seeking of the mental and material body to awaken to the spiritual activities, so may the growth in faith bring the activating forces of the Spirit that makes alive in the flesh. We present the outline on faith. Please suggest any further headings which should be added. Rather would we fill those that have been outlined with that as may be furnished as experiences of individuals, as to the tests, whether of faith or confidence, according to that held as the ideal, and, as given, whether it partakes of the physical conscious sense, or that of the spiritual intuitive forces as comes from close communion with the Holy Spirit, the promised Comforter, the consciousness of the Christ. When in the meditation of faith, we are told to pray, "Create in me a pure heart, O God." Does the word heart refer to the subconscious mind? Please give some light on the word heart. As in the physical body, the heart considered the seat or the source of that which impels life to all portions of the body. In that sense, then, in creating in me a pure heart, a pure soul, a pure purpose, that in all forces, all circumstance, all conditions, in all the active forces of the body, in mind or in physical contact, may bring as life, light, understanding, to those contacted as does the heart to the body. This as an attribute or a representation then, as is used to signify that purpose, that intent, that life, that characterization, of the active forces of an entity, a body, a mind, the imaginative forces, the conscious forces, the subconscious or soul forces. Not as of the subconscious alone, rather that illustrates, as of the seat, the source, the activating forces that impel those as would do his biddings. As create within me a pure heart, O God, and renew a right, righteous, Holy Spirit within me.